All right, well, we'll just dive in. We got lots to talk about today. Turning your Bibles, you got two places that you need to be going. The first is Revelation 6, and the second is Matthew 24. Pastor Dave is away. He is on vacation visiting, just in a cabin in the mountains of Georgia and having a great time and just getting refreshed and renewed. He's going to come back charged up, and we're going to be blessed. But pray for him while he and Kathy are away, that they would just really relax and hear what the Lord has to say to them. This morning, we continue in our Last Days Church series. We're finishing up. We've got about 2 more weeks in this week and next. And this morning is one of those messages, if you got my email blast, that you want to fasten your seatbelt, right? Take your seatbelt, grab your hands right here, right? Not just the belt of truth. You want the seat belt, okay? And because here's what happens. When you're in most of us have ridden in an airplane, and they tell you to fasten your seatbelt. Now, I've never been in an airplane that I needed to fasten my seatbelt because the plane just all of a sudden dropped 10,000 feet and I hit the ceiling, okay? I've never been in a plane where it just got so rough that I got shaken out of my seat. But I put my seatbelt on because they tell me to put my seatbelt on in case something happens. That's the whole reason you put the seatbelt on, is to prepare, just in case. We don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Billy Graham just came out with an article this week. And actually it was an article that he had written back in the 1950s. Billy Graham is probably the only evangelist. He's 97 now, and he is the only one that's really kind of had a spotless or mostly spotless career as an evangelist. It seems like they're all falling in one way or another, or getting discredited or whatever. But Billy, for the most part, has tried to stay true to that course, and he had a message back in the 50s that he gave, and I want to share just a little bit of this. It was published just this week, and it's in the Decision magazine if you subscribe to that. But here's what he writes. In the event of a national catastrophe, much confusion, terror, and consternation would reign. What would the Christian do? What should our attitude be? Which way would we turn if the country in which we live were suddenly wrecked and all the props gone? As a whole, our nation does not know what privation is. We do not know what sacrifice is. We do not know what suffering is. Suppose persecution were to come to the church in America as it has come in other countries. The immunity to persecution that Christians in our country have experienced in the past 2 or 3 centuries is unusual. Christ strongly warned Christians that to follow him would not be popular, and that in most circumstances it would mean cross-bearing and persecution. The Bible says that all who, quote, desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. 2 Timothy 3:12 rather. Jesus said that as the time of his return draws nigh, quote, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you. Luke 21:12. We have no scriptural foundation for believing that we can forever escape being persecuted for Christ's sake. The normal condition for Christians is that we should suffer persecution. Are you willing to face persecution and death for Christ's sake? Wow. Sobering article, and it goes on with more of the same. Why does he write that now? Why does he republish that now? I mean, everything's peachy keen. Everything's fine. Right? Right? There's no persecution coming. There's no, Christians are held up as those people that we really love, and the Muslims are more lovable by the world's standards, by America's standards, by what's going on. The world has got this thing where it's kind of like, Christian, Muslim, atheist, which one are we going to? Christian, shh. You can have your beliefs, but keep them to yourself, okay? Don't talk about them. Don't tell anybody about them. And the world is increasingly getting more anti-Christian. Now, the challenge is that many Americans have this view, well, yeah, I know it's going to get bad, but you know what? I'm out of here before it gets really bad. I'm out of here. Where are you going? You taking that trip to Mars? No. What most but many Christians today believe in the rapture, and they believe that the rapture is going to happen pre-tribulation. The rapture is that catching away to go be with Jesus. That's what the rapture is about. In fact, there's some movies. Movie just came out. Many of you probably saw it. This one that came out last year with Nicolas Cage. Next screen. And Left Behind. And the whole story is about an airplane pilot, and the rapture happens, and all these people just suddenly disappear from the plane. They're gone. And the world, all these people disappear. And of course, this movie came out, you fast forward backwards, rather, about 10 years earlier, we had Left Behind, the original. Next screen. And here we had the two older movies that came out, and the books that were written. Jerry Jenkins and Tim LaHaye wrote the original books, and the original intent was they were going to have 7 books to really kind of tell the end time story. The publishers got on board. They saw the success of the first book, and of course, it didn't go from 7. It went from 7 to 16. You stretch it out, you make more money. And so that's what they did. I mean, I'm not trying to ridicule Jenkins or LaHaye, but the publishers got involved, and that's what they do. So they stretch it out, and they have all these books, and they tell the story. And how many of you have read at least some of those books? Okay, a good share of you. And the rapture is one of those things that it's a strange doctrine. The rapture, the idea that millions of people all of a sudden on the earth would just disappear. It's crazy. Where does that come from? It actually comes from 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 13. It says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. We tell you this directly from the Lord. We who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet him ahead of those who have died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the believers who have died will rise from their graves. Then, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever, so encourage each other with these words." The Christians in Thessalonica were wondering, how does this all going to work? They'd heard the teaching of the rapture. They heard that if you were alive when Jesus came back, you're going to be caught up and catch and meet the Lord in the air. The sound of the trumpet, the voice of God comes, and you meet the Lord in the air. And so they started asking, what happens to people that have died? Do they miss out? And that was really what their question was, and that's what Paul was writing, trying to explain. No, this thing, the rapture is going to happen, and those that have died will have preceded us, and we'll all meet the Lord in the air together. It's like, okay, that's how it works. Now, it's a strange verse. It comes, the rapture comes from those two words, caught up. That's how it's translated in most of your translations. The original language is the word harpazo, which means to grab violently, to just grab them and take them, snatch them. And rapture in a sense means I'm raptured, I'm caught up in something. And the term is in Christendom has become very popular and very common. And so we have got Christians that are all over the map. Some that say that the rapture is going to happen any day now, any moment, before the end of this message. And some of you are hoping for that. And so you got the rapture some people that believe the rapture is going to be pre-tribulation, before things get really bad. Some people that believe that it's going to be post-trib, meaning at the end of the tribulation period, this time period that's coming, the rapture is going to take. And some people believe it's a mid-trib. Now, some people are like, tribulation, what are you talking about? Well, Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 tells that there is a 7-year period yet to happen on the planet where God's dealing with Israel and he's dealing with his people. And it says, Daniel 9:27, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate." Now you read that and you're like, I don't get that. Most people, when they read that, I'm like, that's just total, unless you've studied prophecy, you're like, what? That's not only Greek, that's like strange. And your desolation and all these things. The word week doesn't mean a 7-day week. It's more like the word, if I say a dozen, you know that I'm talking about 12. If I say a decade, I'm talking about 10. In the Hebrew, when they use the word 7, It was a shabuim is actually the word, and it's just referring to a seven anything. Groups of seven. And so when it says week, that's really how they translate it, not really meaning a week of days, but really a week of years. So there's going to be a 7-year period that this Antichrist, the he, earlier in the passage it identifies basically a leader, coming world leader, who's going to become the Antichrist. He's going to make a covenant with the people of Israel for 7 years. In the middle of that period, the middle of that 7-year period, he's going to set up the abomination of desolation, which we learn from other passages is basically the temple gets rebuilt and he sets himself up, the Antichrist, as God in the temple so that he's worshipped. God basically has enough of it and says, begins pouring out the wrath on the Antichrist and his kingdom, and then at the end of the 7-year period we enter in the millennium. So the question is, well, where's the rapture? Does it happen before all that bad stuff? Does it happen at the end? There's some Christians that say that we're going to go through persecution and we're going to suffer all the way through. But some people are like, well, no. The 1 Thessalonians 5 tells us that we shall not suffer the wrath of God, so we're out of here before anything bad happens. And then other people are like, well, I know the Bible says this and the Bible says this, so I'm just going to go with the midpoint. Because the midpoint is, talks about that, the middle of the tribulation, and actually refers to the middle of the tribulation in a couple different ways that the middle of the tribulation is referred to. Actually, next screen. So you got these 3 different views, okay? And then some people say, no, I'm a pan-trib. Pan, what's that? Well, I believe it's all just going to pan out in the end. Well, the Bible's a little bit more specific than that. So how do we make this all work? Because there are verses that support pre-trib, there are verses that support post-trib. The mid-trib, honestly, has problems because it says that no one knows the day or the hour. So if I know when the tribulation starts, and I count, and the Bible, the mid-trib, the midpoint is identified in 4 different ways in the Bible: 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years, times, and half a time. So it's very specific because that's when the abomination occurs. That's when the Antichrist does his final thumb at God, and God's going to have enough of it and begin the real tribulation. In fact, that second half of the tribulation is called the Great Tribulation, is what the scriptures say. So how are we to put this all together? Now, I've taught through the book of Revelation at my old church, and at the time when I taught it, I was 90% certain pre-trib. If you ask me, are we going to be out? I'm 90% certain. 10% of me is like, there are a couple of verses that I can't quite explain, but that maybe we'd be, somewhere else, but 90% certain. In my church, at the end of me teaching through Revelation, everybody agreed with me, okay? Because I beat them up really good. And then when it came to, I started looking at some scriptures, and I just they couldn't quite make them fit. Because what happens is, when it comes to there's certain scriptures that they don't say pre-trib. In fact, they make it not pre-trib. And so you read them, and it's like, I know it says that it's not going to be pre-trib, but really if you twist it and you look at it this way, and you turn it upside down, and you look at it through one eye instead of 2, you can make it kind of fit something else. And that's what I did. I twisted and distorted. And then somebody showed me that, there's another way. Pre, mid, and post. I think they're all wrong. There's a little bit of each that's true because there are scriptures that support it. But there's a way biblically to make it all fit. You see, we believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God, and God's word doesn't contradict itself. And so somehow this all has to fall together. And there's another way to look at this to make it fall together. Now, Jesus gives us 2 pictures of this scenario, of how this thing falls out. And those 2 passages, we've been going through, of course, the book of Revelation, and we looked at the first few chapters of Revelation 1. It's in the vision of Jesus. And then we saw in Matthew 24, the disciples asked Jesus, hey, give us this breakdown. When does all this stuff happen? Because they're a little bit freaked out themselves. So Matthew 24, if you've got your Bible, turn there. Matthew 24, verse 1. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now, they're looking at the beauty of this temple, and he just says, this thing is going to be toast. What? This is God's holy temple. Why would God toast the temple? Why would God say, not one stone remain, everything torn apart? So, Verse 3, now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? The disciples are like, okay, Jesus, how's this all going to play out? I don't understand. How does this fit? So the rest of Matthew 24 is Jesus' confidential briefing, telling them exactly how this fits, the time frame, the timeline. And if you're a pre-trib person, Matthew 24 is one of those passages that you kind of distort, twist, and you're like, oh, I know it says this, but it's not really referring to that, and you kind of have to deal with it. In fact, to give you an idea, where is it going? At the end of Matthew 24, look at verse 30. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds from one end of heaven to the other. Sounds like the rapture. Trumpet, angels, gathering together the elect. Okay, it sounds like it's referring to this rapture thing. If I was just reading it and didn't have any preconceived notions, that's what it sounds like. Skip to verse 38. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. So Matthew 24, that one's taken, one's left. That sounds like the rapture. If I don't have any preconceived notions, and I know that there's this rapture thing happening, talked about in 1 Thessalonians 4, it's strange, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it's what the Bible says. It's referring to it again. Jesus himself is describing it. These are red letters. So it's telling you one's taken, one's left. Okay. Well, we compare that. What we're going to do is just go on a journey here comparing Matthew 24 with Revelation. And Revelation, of course, lays out the end times, right? Revelation 1:19 tells us that he's going to show us what the things that are, the things that will be, and the things that will soon come to pass. And then Revelation, and it's a vision of Jesus, Revelation 1. Revelation 2 and 3 are the 7 churches. And it's the 7 church ages, and we see how this all lines up, and how the fact that the church, there's apostasy. Last week, Pastor Dave was talking about the church of Laodicea, the lukewarm church, the church that Jesus wants to spit out of his mouth. And he just wishes that we were hot or cold. And he's speaking to our church age right now. And that's the way the church really is. The church, throughout the last 2,000 years, has never been so lukewarm, honestly. So God's speaking, and we know Revelation 2 and 3, okay, that's the next thing. Well, what's the next thing in the horizon according to Revelation? Well, chapter 4 is John's vision of heaven. We see John sees heaven, and he sees the angels worshiping. He sees the 24 elders. Chapter 5, then, he sees the scroll, and the scroll is sealed. It's got 7 seals, but it also has writing inside and outside. And at that day, if it was written inside and outside, that was an indication that it was a title deed. Like you have a deed to your house. And so those types of important documents, they would write on the outside what it is, they'd write on the inside all the details. And so as they look at this title deed, it's apparently the deed for the earth, the title deed of the earth. And they say, who is worthy to take the scroll and open it? And John weeps because nobody's worthy. Nobody's able to open the scroll. And then finally, a lamb, as if it was slain before the foundation of the world, comes up and takes the scroll. And of course, that's Jesus. And he begins, and he takes the scroll, and now he's going to begin to pop the seals. We see what's next on the horizon. Let's look through this. Revelation 6:1. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Okay, these 7 seals, the first 4 of these 7 seals are the 4 horsemen. You may have heard of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So this first horse is the white horse. And most of the Bible scholars agree this is referring to the Antichrist for a couple reasons. He's coming now, and he's not coming at the end. We know that Jesus comes on the end, and he's riding on a white horse. His horse, though, is called Air Horse One. That's the one he comes on. This guy comes on a white horse, and he comes to conquer. Jesus doesn't need to conquer. He owns it all. And so this guy, in fact, it says that he's got it's got a crown, and he's got a bow. And the word bow is it's the same word we get, the rainbow, referring to a covenant. So he's holding on to a covenant. Of course, the Antichrist is the one that signs that covenant with Israel. And so this is referring to the Antichrist. Okay, so the first one, seal 1, Antichrist, white horse. Now, let's compare that then with Matthew 24. Jesus is giving his disciples the timeline. Matthew 24, verse 4. And Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." Well, the first thing here we see, the first thing that Jesus tells them is, hey, there's people that are going to say that they're Christ. Okay, so false Christs is the first thing that Jesus says. Now, let's just compare back and forth. The second seal, Revelation 6, when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out. And it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. Okay, the second seal is the red horse, which is war. Okay? So war, there's battles. Of course, that doesn't describe us today. The fact that we have more wars going on in the world today than there probably ever have been. So much conflict, so much with ISIS and all these, people vying. We have Syria. Just take Syria, and we've got so many people in Syria. Not just that there's, usually in a war there's this side and this side. Here you get to Syria, and you've got this side, that side, and this side. And they're vying for power. They're all struggling for power. So wars, and let's compare. What does it say in Matthew 24? You will hear wars, verse 6, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. So, here we see wars. Revelation said there's war. Matthew 24 says there's war. Next seal, Revelation 6:5. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." Okay, this third seal is famine, inflation, both. So the idea that food somehow gets scarce. And most famines, honestly, are manipulated by power control. Now, sometimes it's for drought and different things. What's going to happen is it's describing this idea of a quart of wheat for a denarius. A denarius was a day's wage. So basically, you would work all day for a quart of wheat. A quart of wheat was enough to feed one person for a day. Imagine, you work an entire day, and all you can do is feed yourself. You can't feed your family. It says 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. And barley was the lower grade food. And so a person, a working man could work, and he would get just enough to feed his family for one day. And so each day you worked just enough to feed yourself. We're talking the ultimate in hand to mouth. That's what we're talking about. Now, and the idea that food had gotten so expensive is really what it's talking about. It's called inflation. How does inflation happen? And we don't have any inflation happening right now. We don't. We're at 0%. 0%. We have almost $20 trillion in debt. And how do governments pay for debt? They try to pay it back with cheaper dollars. Okay? If you look at Germany in the late 19 teens into 1920, they had some major inflation. Now this is maybe a little bit hard for you to see. 1918. Let's use it in terms of these terms. They use the gold mark. Okay, let's say a 1 gold mark bought you a loaf of bread. Okay, in 1918, because of inflation, that same loaf of bread, fast forward, only 5 years later, cost you 1 trillion gold marks. How'd that happen? Well, Germany, the government was in debt, and so they just began. Turn on the printing presses. More money in circulation, the value of money goes down, the price of things goes up, and pretty soon it got the inflation was so run away that as soon as you got paid, you'd want to, your money, the next moment would be worth less. So you'd try to do something with your money. You didn't want to hold on to money, because as soon as you held on to money, it was immediately. It was going 100% a day in some cases. Crazy. Are we headed there? I hope not, but we are headed for some inflation. And that's why the Fed, they just said this past week that, in December, we're likely going to raise the interest rates, because they recognize if they don't do something, this keeping the interest rates this low for so long, what it does, it's going to eventually have runaway inflation. And so they're going to try to raise the interest rates to balance it. And this tightrope that they're walking. They're letting you know, hey, something's up. Bible says something's up. Inflation's coming. Well, how does that compare? Look at the Matthew 24, verse 7. For nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, earthquake. Once again, it talks about famines. That's the next thing on the horizon in the sequence. Revelation 6:7. The fourth seal opened. I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So this is referring to pestilence. And what is pestilence? Pestilence is, we're talking about major diseases that wreak havoc. 1917, 18, millions of people in Europe died because of Spanish flu, a pestilence. Just last year, thousands, tens of thousands of people died because of Ebola, a crazy, deadly disease. Not nearly as contagious as the Spanish flu was. The Black Plague, other pestilence that's happened in history. So that's what's saying is going to happen there with this fourth seal. Look at Matthew 24:7 once again. There'll be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. He's saying that's what's next. That's the next thing on the horizon. Revelation 6:9. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. And of course, that's the martyrs. Now, it just says there's a group of people, they've been killed for their faith. What does Matthew 24 say? He says, verse 8, All these are the beginnings of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. Once again, the persecution on the Christians, on the church. Speaking of that persecution happening, notice it parallels exactly what's the next thing on the horizon. Finally, the sixth seal, Revelation 6, verse 12. I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth and the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So the first thing we see here is we see solar eclipse. The sun becomes like sackcloth, black. The moon become like blood, lunar eclipse. We see this, the stars of the heaven fall to the earth. In other words, a meteor shower. And it says it's like figs. Figs. What are figs? The fig tree is a picture of Israel. Israel being shaken. Israel, something's going on. Something's up. Well, that's what's going on there in the sixth seal. What happens in Matthew? The next thing in the Matthew sequence, don't go there yet, is that verse 15 in your passage, the 15 to 28, is really speaking of the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation and what's going on during the tribulation period. Revelation kind of just skims over it because Revelation is going to hit it a couple chapters later and focus specifically on that in chapters 12 and 13 of Revelation. But Matthew 15 to 28 is really kind of what's happening with the Antichrist and his persecution. Verse 29, though, Matthew 24:29, here it is on the screen. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Once again, it's the signs in the heavens. So the sequence is, you can see it, false teachers, wars, famines, pestilence, Christian persecution, signs in the heavens and the earth. the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipses, things that are going on, God's saying, wake up. Now, what also happened, remember there in Revelation, is that the people on the earth begin to fear the wrath of the Lamb. In other words, the wrath of God is about to be poured out, and they're getting scared. But remember, the child of God will not experience the wrath of God. So if you're born again, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, what happens is you're going through this part, and this is coming, and God says you're not going to have to experience it, but I'm headed towards it. What's going to happen next? What's the next thing on the horizon? 1 Thessalonians 5:9, that's actually the verse, for God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. Beautiful promise. Yeah, somebody said, thank God. Thank God. We're not going to experience the wrath of God. Revelation 7 is the next thing that happens in the Revelation sequence. 7, look at verse 9. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. All of a sudden, there's this huge group of people in heaven, so big that no one could count them. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every color, every race, they're all there. Okay, that's kind of interesting. All of a sudden, in heaven, after those 6 seals, they appear. Verse 13, then one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, sir, you know. In other words, he's saying, I don't know, but you know. Tell me what's going on here. So he said to him, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. This is a huge group of people that come out of the tribulation. All of a sudden, they're in heaven. That kind of sounds like the rapture. All of a sudden, they're in heaven, and it's this great multitude of people. It doesn't say that they trickle in. If you have a pre-trib eyes and pre-trib glasses, well, they kind of are coming in over that time period during the tribulation. That's not what it says. It just says, all of a sudden, I see this great group of people here in heaven. Matthew 24, what do we see the next thing in the sequence? Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Here we have the trumpet. Here we have the gathering of the elect, the angels, all those things that we heard in Revelation or in 1 Thessalonians 4. Now look at verse 24, chapter 24, verse 32. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Once again, referring to the fig tree, being Israel. And it says, this generation will not pass away. Pastor Dave talked about it a few weeks back when he talked about Jesus is coming soon, that message. The generation that saw Israel form as a nation, God's time clock started ticking. And it's like a countdown. We don't know how long that time clock is, but it said that generation will not pass away till all these things be fulfilled. When did Israel form as a nation? May 14th, 1948. Now, we don't know how long a generation is. In the Bible, there's 3 different numbers that are used for a generation. One is 40 years. That would have happened. That meant that if it was 1948, that meant in 88 would have been the rapture. Or would have been, that all these things would have been fulfilled. And a bunch of people thought that the rapture was going to happen in 1988. You and I are still here, so unless we missed it, it didn't happen. Now, another option was that it's 70 years. Well, go from 1948 to 70 years. Where do you get to? 3 years from now. Could be. All these things being fulfilled. Now, another generation in the Bible is also 120 years. So you still got some time. But we don't know what it is. No man knows the day or the hour. We all need to be ready. That's the point. That's what God is trying to say here. But you see the fig. When you see the fig tree and its figs getting ready, it's telling you the season is upon us. Get ready. Matthew 24:35. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. Once again, we've got that two people. One's taken, one's left. That's obviously the rapture. Notice the cycle. Notice the sequence. It all follows along. Here's that final screen where you've got that all 7 of them. They all line up. They all match. God's trying to tell us. He told his disciples there in Matthew 24, the private briefing. We see here, John sees it a further picture in the whole book of Revelation. We just went through that chronologically. If we take the book of Revelation chronologically, that's what happens. It makes sense. The first 11 chapters in the book of Revelation are perfectly chronological and show you what's going to happen, the order it happens, and what to expect. Now, there's another passage that gives a lot of people, gives the pre-tribbers problems. And I was one of those pre-tribbers, and it gave me lots of problems. And that was 2 Thessalonians 2. Okay, 2 Thessalonians 2 is one of those passages that I can't tell you how many times I heard people teach it, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just I love the word, and I want to understand it, and a Bible teacher would teach 2 Thessalonians 2, and I'd listen, and I'm like, it's not what it says, but you're smarter than I am, so you must be right. And I would listen, I'm like, okay, and then they would say it, and like, okay, it makes perfect sense, and I'd go back and read it, and I'm like, that's not what it says. Is there another option? Here, look at 2 Thessalonians 2. Verse 1, now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you, not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Look what happened. Here's the Thessalonian church. They had been told about the rapture. They'd been told about the second coming. They knew the end time scenario. And they knew what was going to happen, but they said, hey, we're thinking that we missed it. They were thinking that they missed the rapture. That's why he's writing this. Don't be soon shaken or mind or troubled, either by spirit or word or letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Now I want you to think for a second. If they thought the day of Christ had come, they couldn't have been post-trib, thinking that the day of Christ had come, we missed it, and now we're in the millennium. No, that wouldn't make sense. The millennium is going to be amazing. It's going to be heaven on earth. So that's not what they believed. They didn't believe in the post-trib. If it was pre-trib, it could have been what they were thinking, because they're like, somehow we're in this tribulation period, and now we're suffering, and we're thinking that we must have missed it. God took the saints, everybody up, and we just got left behind, and we're suffering tribulation. That's possible. But this pre-wrath view is also a possibility. So how do we reconcile this? Notice it says there that it's, verse 3, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day, which day? The rapture day. That day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. Okay, so that day, the rapture is not going to happen until the falling away, the apostasy, the lukewarm church happens, and the man of sin is revealed. Wait a second. Most pre-trib people believe that you're not going to see who the Antichrist is because you're taken out before the tribulation. But this just said, for that day will not come unless falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. So it says that day, the rapture, will not come until the falling away, apostasy, Laodicean church, and the man of sin is revealed. If you just read it, it says that the Antichrist is going to be revealed before the rapture. Now, if you're a pre-tribber, like I was, I had to take that and I had to twist it and shape it and move it around and basically say, well, it says this, but it means this. It says that the apostasy comes first, and then the man of sin will be revealed. And basically, the man of sin is revealed after the rapture. I know he talks about it there, but it happens over here. But the apostasy happens, and then the rapture happens, and then that happens. I know it says the other way, but that's not really what he means. But shouldn't we just let Scripture speak for itself? And so here he continues on, son of perdition, and notice, why does Paul give us all these details on the Antichrist if we're not going to see him? He gives us all these details because he wants you to see him and know him when he appears. Verse 4, and exalts himself, speaking of the Antichrist, above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. Okay. So, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them strong delusion, that they may believe a lie. That's continuing on. So, the point is, they have all these details on the Antichrist, but if the rapture happens before the tribulation, before the Antichrist is revealed, why all those details? He wanted them to know. He said, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see this, you're going to see this, you're going to see this, you're going to see this. And when you see all this, then you know it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Then you're ready. Then you're ready to get raptured, to practice. We had in college we had rapture practice. I'm like, take me up, Lord. I just did there's a group of 9 of us that did the Tough Mudder obstacle race. It was like 12 miles and 20 obstacles, and it was a lot of fun. So we had a reveal team, and we had our T-shirts and all that fun stuff. I needed to practice more rapture practice because that was the thing where I kind of blew it. I just couldn't jump high enough and far enough. I'm a little bit vertically challenged. So anyway, some more rapture practice for Ty. So the point is, this passage makes it clear. If you just read it as it is, it's clear the Antichrist is going to be revealed. We're going to know who the Antichrist is before the rapture happens. We're going to know. Now, he could be on the scene right now. He could be in power right now. I don't know. We don't know all the details, but before the rapture happens, that's what's going to take place. Now, a question that we often get then is people ask us, well, where is America in prophecy? Anybody ever asked that? Okay. We are basically the most powerful nation in the world right now. We're in the end times. So where is America? 3 options. None of them are very good. First one is that we're just not mentioned. The Bible talks about Israel. It's not really concerned with other nations. And right now we've made commitments to Israel that we will back them up in the event of an attack, an invasion. But we've basically communicated to the world and to Israel that, well, we don't really mean that. And so when it comes to Israel being invaded, remember that's the next thing on the geopolitical timeline. Pastor Dave talked about it a couple weeks ago on the message, Jesus is coming soon. Ezekiel 38 and 39, there'll be a Russian-led invasion into Israel. That's what it's going to be. And of course, we have Russia, Iran, and Syria all working together, and we see it. It's just amazing. You read your Bible, you read the newspaper, boom, it's the same. And so that's what's going to take place next. And when they do that, the United States is going to do one of 2 things. It's going to step back and say, hey, sorry, you're on your own. If there's an administration change, we might try to do something, but I don't think that that's going to happen either, because the Bible says that Israel's going to stand on their own. There's nobody that's going to support Israel in that last time. So what's the second option? Well, so that's the first option. The second option is that we're alluded to as the coastlands. In other words, this is not a very good option, but some Bible teachers believe that we are referred to here in Ezekiel 39 and verse 6, next screen. And I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in security in the coastlands. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. Basically, there's some kind of nuclear exchange. Magog is referring to Russia, and the coastlands, from the original language, it really kind of means like the faraway lands. And so we're about as far away from Israel as you can get, okay? And so the idea that there's some kind of exchange, nuclear exchange, and that fire coming down both on Russia and on us. That's a possibility, not one I'm really excited about either. And the third one is that the USA is actually Mystery Babylon, which is destroyed. That doesn't sound very fun either. Pretty sobering. Now, if you're Bible literate and you know what Mystery Babylon is Revelation 17:18, Jeremiah 50:51. This total destruction because she was proud. She was exporting all of her licentiousness and pornography basically all over the world. She was murdering children, kids, babies. She was thinking that she was invincible, and God judged her. Mystery Babylon. Now, Babylon today, the real Babylon, is just a little wide spot in the road. So it's not really referring to literal Babylon. It's referring to a country, nation. And we do fit that description eerily well. So, that said, where are we right now? We know that, the rapture's coming. We don't know how soon, but we know that it's there. There's the seal judgments that are in process. We know that there's potential judgment upon the United States. Not that we've done anything warranting judgment or had any Supreme Court rulings lately that would warrant the judgment of God. So these things are happening, and we have other nations that think that America's great, like Iran and ISIS and Russia and North Korea, and we have a lot of enemies. And do you know what's interesting? Go back 20 years, and we had lots of bombs, we had lots of military power. No one would touch us. Why? Because we got the strength. Today, we live in a time where technology makes it a level playing field. Makes it a level playing field. There are some things out there that are a little bit frightening when it comes down to it. I just finished reading a book by Ted Koppel, Nightline guy, Nightline news anchor. His book is called Lights Out, and it's a book on a cyber attack, not the possibility, but the inevitability of a cyber attack on our nation's power grid. Okay? And, it's like, okay, hey, we've been through storms. We know what it's like. We live in Florida. We know what it's like to be without power, a couple weeks. That's like, I hate it, but, we can get by. The problem is, with technology today, with cyber warfare and things that go on, it could be a lot worse than just 2 weeks. There was one report by the government House panel that found that if a major cyber attack happened, places of the country could be without power for up to 2 years. 2 years. AC's goodbye. Now, there's a couple other options too. I'm sorry, let me explain too. Cyber attack is becoming very popular. You remember North Korea and that movie that Sony Pictures put out and Sony Pictures didn't put out? And Sony, if you remember the story, what happened is there was this group of people that were, Sony was going to put out this movie that was making fun of North Korea. North Korea found out about it and hacked into Sony, which have 64 different levels of firewalls and securities and systems. They hacked in North Korea, which is one of the most least technologically advanced countries in the world. They hacked into Sony, which is Sony technology, and released emails and released all this stuff, and basically said, if you do anything, if you release that movie, you're in for it. And Obama said, well, we're not going to be, not going to be terrorized, we're not going to be bullied, and all these things, which I appreciate that. But the issue is, there were legitimate threats that they could do things. We just don't know what. The United States, the reason Iran should have had the bomb by now, but the United States and Israel teamed up to create a computer virus called Stuxnet about 3 years ago. And that little virus, they basically planted it, they got it somehow into the computer systems in Iran that controlled their nuclear centrifuges. And they basically tricked their computers to think that everything was fine while the centrifuges basically tore themselves apart. It was a beautiful virus, as viruses are, if it's doing what you want it to do. And the United States said, don't know anything about it. Now, apparently it comes back to us. But the problem with cyber technology is you can bounce things off and you don't know who did it. So we could have a cyber attack on our nation's power grid and potentially not know who did it. And anybody with enough technology, which is not, if North Korea can hack into Sony, there are places, our power grid is not secure. That Ted Koppel book is almost frightening. And Ted Koppel's, he's not some extremist. Okay, it's a book that would be wise to check it out if you have a chance. So that's potential. There's also potential of other things, but persecution is on the rise here in the United States. Islam is now favored and Christianity is ridiculed. Homosexuality is championed and Christians are marginalized as homophobic and bigots. The heat's getting turned up. Persecution is coming. Department of Homeland Security, about 8 years ago, released a document, and basically it was about right-wing extremism, current economic and political climate fueling resurgence in radicalization and recruitment. And the assessment was written so local officials could respond to terrorist attacks by American, quote, right-wing extremists from this department that officially does not use the word terrorist to describe jihadists, but is not reluctant to use the term for pro-life Christians or military veterans. Pro-life Christians that are, hardcore pro-life. I'm not saying that they're bombing abortion clinics, but our government looks at them as used the word potential terrorist. But if they're a jihadist, if they're an Islamic fundamentalist, we're not going to use the term terrorist. What is going on here? Our world is literally upside down, is literally backwards while we continue to just kind of let things go, while we continue to sleep. Well, personal application, what are you going to do with this? John 14, verse 1, let not your heart be troubled. When I started praying about this, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? Lord, what do you want me to do? And the Lord kept bringing me back to these scriptures. Let not your heart be troubled. Let not your heart be troubled. Not because I'm thinking that there's going to be a pre-trib rapture and I'm out of here before it gets bad, but what Jesus says here. What does he say? He says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Jesus is saying, this is not your home. Don't get so caught up on this. I got to make everything work. No, this is not your home. Don't let your heart be troubled. Yeah, it's going to get worse. Yeah, there's persecution coming. Yeah, things that you would never have thought of would happen are going to happen. So, how do you prepare for it? When I prepared for my first marathon, marathon's 26.2 miles, and I only, at the most I'd ever run was a 5K, which is 3 miles. And a friend said, oh, you can do it. I'm like, 26 miles. But he did it, and I'm like, you know what? If he can do it, I can do it. And I got a book, and I read the book, and it said that I had to do all these trainings, and I had to have 6 months to prepare. So for the next 6 months, I did every stinking training, running however many miles it said, and doing cross-training. And I did every stinking training because I was afraid that if I didn't do every stinking training, I wouldn't finish. There's also in the back of my head that I might die, but that's... No, I'm serious. There's people that have died on doing marathons. But anyway, so I'm going through, I got to do every stinking training. I did every stinking training. I did the marathon. I got done. I was like, that was fun. I didn't want to run it again, but it was fun. So how do we prepare? Well, if we see signs of the times, we need to prepare. We need to be preparing for whatever God has ahead. One of the things to prepare, we need to prepare for persecution. How do you prepare for persecution? You got to know the word. Because the temptation is going to be to sit down and shut up. But you got to know the word to know when the lie comes in and says that you can't do this, you can't say that. The word of God says that his word is more powerful, more sharper than any two-edged sword. His word gives me life. His word is everything that I need for life and godliness. And that if we know the word, then we'll be able to counter the schemes of the devil. We need to spend that personal time with Jesus and not get caught up in running this rat race. Our personal time with Jesus is what's most important. Sitting at the feet of Jesus. Being Mary, not Martha. Strength training for our soul. In that sense, that's why you're here. So you're wanting to get your soul stronger. Okay? The whole point when I was doing my trainings for the marathon is I was trying to strengthen different muscles so that I could make it through. The same thing's true for you. You're here today because you want to get stronger some way. You want to get stronger spiritually. So continue to do that, but continue to press in. Don't be satisfied with being a once-a-week Christian. Being here just once a week is not make you a Christian. Strength training for your soul, and then strengthen relationships. Our relationships. You know the only thing you can take to heaven? The only thing you can take to heaven is somebody else. You can't take anything else to heaven. You can't take your flat screen TV, you can't take your car, you can't take your house, but you can take another person by sharing the love of Jesus with them and loving them through the trials that they're also going to face. We need to stick together. We need to prepare for persecution. We need to register and vote. This election is going to be just as important as any other, if not more important than any other we've had before. And there's a lot of candidates still, and be praying for these candidates that God would raise up the right person. Pray, what would God have you do to prepare? What kind of preparation do you need to do? As I mentioned, there's a couple different scenarios. That cyber attack is something that could happen if the power went out for a month, which is possible. And if it went out for a month, and that means if the power's out for a month, that means Publix is closed for a month. What are you going to do? Okay, most of us don't have a month's supply of food. The average American has 3 days. If the Publix is closed and the restaurants are closed, yeah, you're going hunting. And those you, we got some big hunters here, I know. But in my neighborhood, the only thing I can hunt are iguanas. But in other words, preparing. We don't know, but it would be wise. It'd be wise to be preparing at least something, to have something stored up in case of an emergency, in case something happens. That's just wisdom. When I grew up in Montana, and in our home in Montana, we'd have, during the winter, a blizzard would come in, and we may be stuck, literally stuck, not being able to get into town for a couple weeks because the roads would be closed. So you always had lots of food. You stocked up for the winter. Are you stocked up? The other things, the EMP, that's a really scary one. And I'll just share it with you because I like scaring people. EMP is electromagnetic pulse, and basically is what they discovered with a nuclear bomb is that when the bomb explodes, not only is there radiation and fallout, but there's a huge surge, basically, for lack of a better term, it's not technically this, but a huge surge of electricity that goes immediately out to a line of sight until it hits something that absorbs all that it's not electricity, but it's basically neurons and all this stuff, neutrons and stuff like that. But basically, it fries any electrical equipment until it hits enough things that stop it. If a nuclear bomb, a small nuclear bomb, well, let's say a nuclear bomb, let's say a small nuclear bomb were detonated over the city of New York, just 10 miles up in the atmosphere. That means that a radius, that bomb would knock out all power, all electrical, anything computers is wiped out, fried from New York, and it would go, I forget how many miles, it would go like, 100 or 250 miles. So basically, if you take a 250-mile circle around New York, everything that has electronics in it is fried. That means the power is out in that area indefinitely. We don't know how long. Easily 6 months. Now, if you had a really big bomb, and ISIS and Iran don't have a really big bomb, but if they were to get a really big bomb, because they would really love, ISIS says that we are the great Satan. It's Israel second and us first. They want to take us out first. And the technology is not that hard to come by, especially when they're in cahoots with North Korea and so forth. A bomb, if it were to be detonated 100 miles above Kansas, a nuclear bomb, and the electrical, it would fry our entire electrical grid of the entire nation. It's pretty wild, because basically we would be going back to 1800, and nothing that you have that's electronic would work. Everything's fried. No AC, no nothing. In fact, many doubt that the cars would even work. That's a little bit scary. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. Could happen, but do not let your heart be troubled. We got to come back to what's the word say. I'm not going to freak out and worry about, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? There was a National Geographic special called Doomsday Preppers, and all these preppers have got these things that they're preparing for. And my hope and trust is not in the federal government. It's not in the local government. My hope and trust is in the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I got to come back to that. I stand on that and say, Lord, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Today, we had today's message was, I know it was a lot of technical stuff, a lot of theological stuff in that sense, and you're like, whew. But I hope that you're leaving here thinking, am I ready? Because none of us know what's happening next. Are you ready? What does God want to say to you? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we hear these things, and sometimes our heart is troubled. Our heart is afraid. And yet, Lord, perfect love casts out fear. We know that you're perfect love, that you are perfectly in control, that you love us with an everlasting love, and that we will not suffer wrath. But we recognize that our country may face some judgment. Lord, may we be a part of the solution. May we be part of stepping up and really listening to your voice. Father, I pray that each person in this room would be listening to your voice more than ever this week, asking, Lord, what would you have me do? How should I prepare? And God, that we would make that a priority. We'd not just continue with life as normal, going through the motions, going through this life and pursuing that raise, pursuing this job, pursuing this thing, but really asking, God, what's most important? What's on your heart for me to do right now? Lord, I know that you're speaking and that you love us, but may we have ears to listen and hearts to obey. Father, I also pray for anybody that here that is